Hi, everybody. Welcome to English 229, and this is for our class for Wednesday, the 17th, where we begin our first major Gothic text, now that we've spent some time with introduction. And our first major Gothic text is Frankenstein. And as you can see, I've provided links, but of course, you can also use hard copies of the text, any edition that you would like. And I just wanted to briefly introduce the idea of Frankenstein. We'll be talking about this over more than one class. That written by Mary Shelley makes this text perhaps unusual in the sense that we usually think about the Gothic tradition being filled with male authors. And in fact, Mary Shelley is the daughter of Mary Wollstonecraft. You might have heard of before, a very noted feminist. Mary Shelley, also the wife of Percy Shelley, a very noted romantic poet during the time period. And the way this story came about is that it was written in response to a ghost story competition. Mary and Percy and a few of their friends were vacationing and experienced some inclement weather. So in order to pass the time, they challenged each other to write a ghost story. That night, Mary Shelley dreamt of what ultimately became the great creation scene of the creature. And she wrote that up as part of her ghost story, showed it to her husband, known for his great literary prowess, and he suggested that she expand and develop, which she did, and the result being Frankenstein. Now, one of the things that we will talk about is the idea of Percy's involvement in the novel, which is not terribly unusual because most authors usually have editors. And I can't help but wonder if it had been the other way around, if Mary Shelley had perhaps given suggestions to Percy Shelley, there would be less controversy than there is now with Percy giving suggestions to Mary, and the suggestion that perhaps she wasn't completely responsible for her text, which I think is ridiculous. But nevertheless, we'll examine this idea as well as the very iconic 1930s Universal Studio film Frankenstein. And the Universal Studio films of the 1930s brought about some of the great Gothic stories, such as Dracula, for instance, as well. And most people know about Frankenstein and most people know about Dracula because of the influence of film, especially the beginnings of the 1930s. And the film is very different than the plot, extremely different. And there are lots of reasons for that we can talk about. Certainly, film is a very different kind of vehicle, and you've got time limits in film in a way that you wouldn't necessarily have with novel. But you can expect differences with plot. You can expect differences with structure. You can even expect differences with character names. So, that said, I view them as two different stories. There is the text that Mary Shelley wrote, and then there's the 1930s film. And because the film is so iconic, James Whale, being the director, I wanted us to spend this class watching that particular film. So either you've never seen it before, so this is the first time you're watching it, and you're watching it for plot, and you'll see just how very different it is from the text. My hope is that at this point you would have completed reading Frankenstein in its entirety, though I understand that that might be a little bit too optimistic. Do the best you can. And as we are talking about Frankenstein over the next several classes, my hope is that you are beginning our next reading. That's what would be ideal, but the world isn't always ideal. And in terms of Frankenstein, you can certainly see the 1931 version on Amazon Prime or YouTube, but I've also provided you with a free link that you can see or that you can access to see the film. And the film is 1 hour and 10 minutes. So I wanted to keep today really short so that you could watch the film. And then in the next class, we could discuss the film, the way that it differs from the text. And then, of course, we can talk about the text itself. So today's attendance question for our class discussion forum, which would be due on Friday the 19th, but certainly if you need an extension, let me know. And as you know, you're not required to respond to your peers, but you are required to read your peer responses and also to read my responses in turn, which would duplicate or attempt to duplicate what we might talk about in a class discussion. So after you've viewed Frankenstein, whether it's your first viewing or your 100th viewing, I also teach film classes, and the idea is that the more frequently you read a text or watch a film, the more likely it is that you can appreciate all of the nuance within it. So if you've seen it before, it's not that you're done seeing it. Now you get to see it a second or a third or however many times that you've seen it, and be able to appreciate detail that you wouldn't necessarily be able to get on the first viewing. But whether it's your first viewing or not, the question is, what is your response to the 1930s film version of Frankenstein, and why? So I look forward to reading your responses. I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well, and enjoy Frankenstein. And a little bit of a tip, pay close attention to the opening credits. Take care. Bye-bye.